All right, good morning. In the interest of time, I think we're going to get started so we have some time for Q&A at the end. My name is Tanuja Damani. I'm the Chief of Surgical Services at NYU Langone. I live in the Manhattan campus, which is our mothership, and I wanted to talk a little bit with you about some of our strategy in the future of robotic surgery and how we have designed our programmatic growth around that. So it's my pleasure, my honor to be here. Thank you for having me. As I said, we take pride in our rankings and the accolades, but I think what I really admire about NYU, where I've been there now about 5.5 years or so, is their commitment to excellence, their commitment to innovation, and their desire to really lead, and that relentless focus on strategy and growth. You can see our fleet of robotic systems, the Da Vinci systems. We have 22 XIs across our campuses, and that includes Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Long Island. But of course, the majority of our numbers are at Manhattan. We have a hub with each of those. And actually, that is a dated number. Now we do about 4,200 cases a year. So this has been our volume growth over the last 2 decades. And I think more than just the number, what I find more impressive is the adoption of Da Vinci surgery in every division and department at NYU. And that goes not just urology or gynecology or thoracic, but it's in ENT, it's in gender-affirming surgery, it's in Department of Surgery, HPB, acute care surgery, bariatrics, benign general surgery, right? And that's really been a lot of our growth in the last few years is in benign general surgery and bariatrics, as you see. Other than the little dip during COVID, we've continued to grow at a pretty exponential pace. So how did we really get there? And I'll share a little bit about our programmatic growth, but briefly talk a little bit about my journey as a total practice robotic surgeon and my joining NYU Langone. Yeah. So, I did my fellowship in minimally invasive surgery at University of California, San Francisco, and finished in 2005. There was no robotic surgery back then for general surgery. This was pretty much my first job coming out of fellowship at Lenox Hill, Northwell Health now. And I was an advanced MIS surgeon there for about 6 years. And this is where I really had the exposure to robotics, not from the general surgery standpoint, but really seeing some of our colleagues in urology who were doing Da Vinci prostatectomies. And I was just so impressed with their ability to work in the deep pelvic space, the magnification, the dexterity. And we were still using those chopstick laparoscopic instruments, the 2D magnification. My passion was foregut. I was spending quite a bit of time in the mediastinum, and I kind of thought about this thing. I was like, well, this could be really useful in mediastinum, which is one of the most difficult to access cavities with the rib cage, the heart, the aorta. But at that time, we didn't have some of the right tools for general surgery, but more importantly, we didn't have the vision from the leadership to support Da Vinci general surgery. It was really reserved by the urologists, for the urologists, and maybe beginning to make its foray into gynecology. So I actually left academics to go out in the community. And I was in New Jersey at these 2 hospitals for a couple of years because they were a lot more open-minded about me wanting to build a robotic general surgery program. And really over the course of 7 years there, that's where I did everything robotically, from complex colorectal, foregut, general surgery. We grew our program across a couple of campuses, increased our fleet of robots. I became a national proctor for robotic surgery. This was right about the time, maybe 2017. And it was amazing. We started really capturing our data and showing what you will hear repeatedly about the lower conversion rates and the lower length of stays. So again, that led to more investment in the robotic program. This was right about the time that I got a call from my mentor, who was now at NYU as the chief of the Division of General Surgery and the surgeon-in-chief at NYU. And he was one of the most gifted laparoscopic surgeons. He was doing laparoscopic whipples, pure laparoscopic whipples. And I'd been telling him, I was like, you really need to look at robotics. You're going to get some significant advantages. No, I got this down. I mastered this. And then he calls me and he says, you know what? I think I'm going to give this a try. And do you want to come proctor me for robotics? And I think I always say that. When your mentor calls you to be a mentee, that's where you drop everything. He said, what are you doing this Friday? I said, I'll be there, And shortly after that, he recruited me to NYU to really boost their robotic general surgery program. So I think, one of the things I learned over time as I built these programs from scratch at the community hospitals in New Jersey was, some of these insights, some of these lessons learned that it's not easy. It requires a culture change, but it also requires relentless focus on what your vision is. And for me, it was to be a skilled, proficient robotic surgeon, but also to build a multi-specialty robotic program, and then to be an educator and a leader. So I think it's so important to really not just have what we call surgeon champions or nursing champions, which, don't get me wrong, are very important in this equation, but that captain. I heard the term earlier in the talk, that maestro, someone who kind of pulls it together, who's able to collaborate across specialties, who keeps that momentum going for growth, and where there's accountability and key deliverables. And then understanding how do you leverage the value of Da Vinci across multiple service lines. And I'll give you a great example. As you saw, we have all these XIs, but we also had an SP in there. And our SP was sitting there underutilized, right? We just didn't know what to do with it. People had played with it a little bit. And then one of our urologists was starting a gender affirmation program and said, you know what? I'm going to be spending a lot of time in the pelvis. I want to try the SP for this penile inversion vaginoplasty. And that was 2018. And our program is one of the busiest transgender programs, and all of those cases are done robotically with the SP now, and it is actually heavily utilized. So understanding how do you drive that value across multiple service lines to build a total program. As I said, you need your program champions. Obviously, you need your peri-op leads, executive leads, surgeon leads, and they all have to come together to be that catalyst for change. And shared belief. I think this is something you can't fake. Obviously, if you can't walk the walk, no one else will. It is really important, and that builds access. And then, of course, we all need data. As we say this in surgery, but I'm sure it's true. We say, in God we trust, everyone else must bring data. And it's important for us to understand what those metrics are, what the data is, how do you quantify the impact of what you are doing, and what does that mean for executive leadership, whose support we need as they continue to reinvest in the technology that we think is really the present, but heavily the future. So, I actually was very happy in my community practice. I was getting paid really well. I had a great robotic program, but I really thought about NYU primarily because it was a program that had the resources to build this multi-specialty program, to grow it, but it also had the vision, like I said, and the discipline and the leadership that supported it. And I was obviously very interested in foregut, and it was an opportunity for me to build a world-class esophageal center of excellence. So I did join NYU, and really I think all of you know this, having this kind of program leadership structure is critical, not just a steering committee or a task force, but that engagement when you have multi-campuses with local leadership that then engages back to the system leadership. I think it is just so important, right? And who forms our robotic council? It's everybody. It's our surgeon champions, it's our perioperative leads, and it's our executive leads. And all of those decisions are based on the data, how we drive our strategy and investment in the future. So I think, it's so important if you're embarking on this or in the middle of this journey, how do you go from this phase one to world class? And this is an exercise that we were involved in. This is a tool that Intuitive provides called the maturity model that helps you assess. I mean, as we say, it's so important, before you can understand where you want to go, you need to know where you are today. And I think understanding, it was important for us to understand where we were at that day. What did our C-suite engagement look like? Were they really not interested? Were they champions? Where were we? What does the program structure look like? What was our technology? Did we have the most up-to-date technological, fourth generation back then, now fifth to be soon. And did we have the integration we needed in the operating rooms, right? That was very important for us. Were we just collecting our own data, or were we collaborating with Intuitive, using some of their MACA resources or their ecosystem resources to get a better handle on our data, right? Service lines, were we just limited to a couple of service lines, or we were really using it across most of our procedures there? And access, I think you guys have heard about access over and over. It's so key for growth of a program, for surgeon recruitment, surgeon retention, right? Surgeons are frustrated when they know this is their preferred MIS modality and they do not get access. You know, it kind of becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy. If you are not able to provide them access and you say, you know what, you get half a Thursday a week, you do your complex colectomy that day, and the rest of the days you can use a laparoscope, right? That's a problem. That's an exercise in futility, because that's really impedes surgeon proficiency, right? We always say repetition is the master instructor here. And then obviously looking at data insights and driving decisions based on the data insights. So the other thing I was really impressed with when I came to NYU was really, you know, there were all these surgeons looking to adopt and become proficient in robotic surgery, but we had a very clear algorithm of what our training pathways will look like. And it did not matter how prominent you were, how experienced you were, how gifted you were in laparoscopy, right? So as I mentioned, you know, my mentor, Dr. Parash Shah, was surgeon-in-chief. When he transitioned to robotics, he went through the exact same training pathway that a fellowship-trained surgeon was going through, right? It was case observations, peer-to-peer reviews, right? Getting proctored for those using the simulator. Those are all key things. The same thing about recently our entire bariatric division converted to robotics, and our chief of bariatric surgery, she's world-renowned professor of surgery, but went through the same pathway. Why? Because as you guys well know, we can't compromise quality and safety, right? No shortcuts, no exceptions when it comes to training your surgeons and having them go through this pathway. So I think, you know, as I said, as you transition to become really the best-in-class, multi-specialty robotic program, what are the key components of this? Clearly, surgeon proficiency is key. You need surgeons who are, you know, comfortable, not just comfortable, who actually follow this pathway of get good, get fast, and get lean, who know how to do a case expeditiously and keep it lean. So that's really important. It also has implications for training. You know, we're a major academic center. We have multiple residents and fellows. And helping your surgeons achieve that proficiency early translates into them training our residents and fellows better. But again, that requires repetition, right? Otherwise, as I said, it's an exercise in futility. If they're only trying to dabble with the robot for the complex, challenging cases, they are going to get frustrated. Those skills don't translate from laparoscopy. As much as we say they're both MIS systems, there's a real learning curve from laparoscopy to robotics, and those constant touches are key. It's important for us to have the reproducible MIS outcomes. When everyone is trained, the teams are trained, the surgeon is trained, and that's our modality of choice. It creates this, you know, this reproducibility, both in clinical care and in the intraoperative teams. And like I said, having it across multiple service lines really helps with that, maintaining that reproducibility. And again, it's important for us as educators, because much like any other academic center, we have three missions. Clinical care is number one. But then there is research and training, and then there's innovation, right? So when it comes to training, it's important for us to be able to train our residents and fellows for what the operating environment of the future will be like, right? Which is what that surgeon autonomy looks like, what that digital integration looks like. So when they come out, and again, there's a lot of data, we'll share a little bit more, but there's a lot of data that has come out recently in a seminal paper that talks about what they call the death of laparoscopy. Not today, but it's headed there. And they use the VAR models looking at the adoption of robotic surgery over multiple complex general surgery cases based on the temporal trends over the last 8 years. And it shows that by 2025, the MIS modality of choice will be robotic over laparoscopic and open, right? It's going to eclipse laparoscopy as the MIS modality when it comes to adoption. So it's so important for us to be able to train the future surgeons. Again, you've seen this slide before, of course. Executive leadership, we can't go anywhere without executive alignment. It's just so important for us to be able to align what we think of as a robotic multi-specialty program with what the executives are thinking about, right? We always say, healing is an art, medicine is a science, but healthcare is a business, right? And it's important for us to be able to show the return on investment here, right? Our outcomes, critical, right, for us, all of us, from that standpoint. And again, we're looking at the same things, every institution, the length of stays, the readmissions, the complications, right? And that data is so powerful for us when we look at robotics. And I'll show you one of our own papers from our institutions where we looked at some of this. Patient experience. Like many of you, we're in a surgical jungle in Manhattan. We're surrounded within miles with 6 other major centers. It's important for us to be able to differentiate ourselves as the best multi-specialty robotic program, right? Better care team experience, I've talked about it. All the healthcare institutions are facing some of the similar challenges, and personnel shortages are one of the top challenges that we face, right? So it's so important for our nursing teams and our personnel to have less load, workload, mental, physical, and having that care team experience by having less variability and more of that standardization across our operating rooms. Lower total cost of care, and the total word is important, right? Because we're just not looking at, not that operative costs are not important. We know every minute matters. We know the instruments are expensive. But it's important for us also to look at the downstream aspect of it, right? If we're shaving off days on the length of stay standpoint, right? If we're decreasing our conversions, if you're decreasing our complications and readmissions, that's important. Actually, there's a recent paper that just came out in JAMA Surgery looking at 1 million plus emergency general surgery cases. And those were for chole, inguinal hernia, ventral hernia, and colectomy. And they looked at what happens when those cases were done lap versus lap versus robot. And all of those cases, the hernias and the colectomies, we saw a decreased length of stay and a decreased conversion rate, right? The same thing, decreased length of stay and decreased conversion rate. Again, those are dollars, right? So it's important to kind of really compare the whole total cost across the hospital stay. And improved healthcare equity. That's just so important. We've talked about this over and over again. We want to make sure that MIS care for our patients, the way we as surgeons think we deliver the best MIS care, how we are trained and most proficient, is a robotic approach, and that should not end at 3 p.m. If a patient comes in with perforated ulcer or perforated colon at 9:30 a.m., they shouldn't be able to get a robotic colon resection, but if they come at 11 p.m., they're going to have to use laparoscopy or open because we don't have the teams. So in our minds, it's so important that we have that unfettered access, and our ACS division is very happy with the fact that they can do these procedures and get these patients out. So important. Most of these were being converted to open for these complex incarcerated ventral hernias or free air that would come in. Patients would have a laparotomy. They'd be in the hospital for 5 days. Now we're operating on these patients and getting them out, and that bed is valuable for us. So this is, of course, just a breakdown of the robots across our Manhattan campus, 11 obviously, and then Brooklyn and Long Island, as well as our ASC, where we have placed a Da Vinci Xi as well. So, even though we were on this upward trajectory until 2018, but you can see we've really taken off since, and that's because of this mindset around how do we now grow this program and take it to the next level. And that really is where this change happens, when there's coordination, there's shared belief, there's access, right? And that's what really leads to this increase in the numbers that we see. I've said this, data is so important. I mean, this is my own data. This is something that I do a lot, which is robotic hiatal hernia repairs. And again, when we look at these cases just over the last year, 140 versus 100 or 1024 lap, you can see the length of stay is shaved down, operative time less. And it sounds crazy, but so why is your operative time lower? Because there's certain aspects of the case that go so much faster. Once you get past your learning curve, you have to accept that the surgeons will have longer operative times as they're going through their learning curve, much like anything else. But once they get there, it goes from that learning curve to that proficiency, and then you get to what we call mastery, right? That's where you see this sharp drop in the operative times when you get to that mastery. But that's really doing that case over and over again, where now everything is in sync, right? Length of stay, again, laparoscopic surgery is minimally invasive surgery. Why would we have a lower length of stay for an elective hiatal hernia repair, right? A lot of these patients stayed back. We did esophograms on them. They were complex cases. We wanted to make sure we didn't have a leak. But now with the robotic magnification that we have in the operative room, right? And when we're doing this, we don't need this. We have confidence that we don't have any missed injuries. We have no inadvertent injuries. We do intraoperative leak tests, and these patients are all on the same pathway. They come out, they get liquids the same day, they get breakfast, and they're all discharged by 11 a.m., right? So complications, of course, we had very low complications to begin with, but we even see a difference in that and a significant difference in the reoperations. Again, all of this really adds up, these downstream costs, and leading to the total cost savings throughout the cumulative aspect. This is our paper that came out of NYU, actually, looking at about 2-year data, and we looked at about 280,000 cases, laparoscopic and robotic, across 10 surgeries, and those included thoracic, GYN, colorectal, and general surgery. And we said, well, what do we see when we compare these cases, really? And what we found, our total conversion rate for all of these cases was 5%, but we found a significantly lower conversion rate, 58.5% lower for the robotic cases, right? And what does that conversion mean? When we say, well, the conversion is meaningful, it's important for the surgeon and more importantly for the patient, but when you look at what is the cumulative cost of conversions when it comes to the institutions, what kind of financial strain does that place, and how do you quantify that? That's where you see that each conversion we saw increased 1.77 days, incremental increase. That led to a dollar amount of $34.41, right? So it is really important when you start looking at large scale what happens, not just any one conversion that you have. So as we think about what we have today, how do we kind of enable the future? What are we thinking of in our minds? What are our executives thinking of in their minds as we start thinking about the data, where we're headed in the future? And really, this is something that's very, common for a lot of places. There are lab towers lined up in the hallways. They're being wheeled in and out of the operating rooms for stuff that you need. And we really started thinking about, based on the adoption trends that data is supporting and that institutionally we're seeing, is this the right reinvestment for us in this infrastructure, right? And let's look at that. Let's see what our data shows, And when we pulled our numbers, what we saw over the last 5 years or so, we are seeing a 17% increase in robotic surgery, in Da Vinci surgery, and we're seeing a concomitant 12% decrease in laparoscopic surgery. And like I said, based on the recent trends that came out, another study in surgical endoscopy, that the death of laparoscopy, showing the exact same trends will continue to go down. So then are we really preparing ourselves for what is going to happen as far as the adoption of robotic surgery across several specialties, right? It's also so important for us to start thinking about utilization. We have 80 lab towers. We have 20 Da Vinci systems. When we look at how many cases we're getting per system, we're doing about 429 average cases per system, but we're doing 54 cases per lab tower. That's a very significant utilization discrepancy for us, right? So I think now as we think about where our capital investment will be, it's in this system, the Da Vinci system, that is more scalable, more reproducible, that our trends show is where the adoption is headed. And that's key for us to be able to do that, because as we look to continue to grow our programs, we need to be able to recruit and retain surgeons and to be able to have this in all of our operating rooms, really. The key, of course, is to make sure that there's integration, and that's where we'll talk about a couple of things, how that helps us. So again, like I said, why do we standardize our ORs, right? Now we have the camera head that allows us to plug in any laparoscope in it, so we don't need to wheel in a Stryker tower or another lap tower just for surgeons to be able to get an OptiView entry, right? Just for surgeons to do a little lysis of adhesions before they put their robotic ports and dock the robot. So we are eliminating that. We just use the handheld, and that allows us to do everything. So the surgeons who want to either start or do a little bit of laparoscopy, they have that integration and doesn't require the redundant equipment that, again, leads to staff workload and burden, right? We are, again, in Manhattan. Real estate is very little, and the rooms can be tight based on the number of ORs we have all around. So we want to remove that redundant materials that need to be. Now we have a boom that comes in, and it doesn't take real estate space around the patient bed, around the care teams. So that's really important for us. And then, like I said, that consistency and reproducibility is so important. That variability, as we say, is the enemy here, right? And again, getting the data, lab, we really didn't have much. Surgeons, we would record our cases, we would view our cases, maybe there was CSATs that would give us some feedback, but now we're able to get so much meaningful data, more so, as you'll see in the DV5 that's coming out, where the case insights that can really help the surgeon's proficiency, but more importantly, also aligning ourselves and collaborating to be able to get that data on a bigger scale for what we are doing. So again, understanding our costs. I mean, I don't need to tell this group what the value is. Quality divided by cost here is so important for us to really be efficient and integrated in the operating rooms. Look at our I&Es. And again, we have surgeon dashboards. We follow them. We try to understand why, if there are 4 robotic gynecologists that are doing hysterectomies, why is there this variability, be it in operative times? Of course, there are confounders to that, but in the costs. Is there redundant instrument use? Can we eliminate things? And I think this is not meant to be punitive, but it's about transparency and really trying to see how we can improve the surgeons, improve the process that we have. Our back tables are extremely lean for robotics, right? We literally have 2 instruments. There's just no suction irrigators, nothing. So I think it's just so important for us to understand how do we make this process lean rather than saying to surgeons, you should do this lap because it's cheaper. And that's a recipe because surgeons who are coming out are trained. And I always say that. I am very thankful to NYU that they have supported me and put me in leadership positions. But if they came to me and said, you cannot do robotics for XYZ, I would leave. Because that is fundamentally what I've done for the last 15 years, and I truly believe that that is the best thing for my patients and for me, right? And that enables me to get the outcomes that I want. So 24/7 access, this is something that, like I said, our EGS, ACS group is heavily involved in. Of course, that requires for them to have this access to the robot because they have unpredictable hours and cases, but that is important for us. We do want our patients to be able to come. We see our ER numbers, our ED growth. Every day we're seeing 400 patients a day. A bunch of them are surgical consults, and we want to be able to, there's always that bed crunch, bed holds. We want to be able to get these patients up to the operating room, and many are discharged right through the PACU. They never make it to our inpatient floors. So I think it's so important for us to save that precious resource for us. Less complications. Like I said, this is not just our data. As I said, 1 million+ cases, JAMA surgery, less conversions, lower length of stays for emergency general surgery cases, and we're just beginning to see that adoption. This is going to take off significantly as we look at it. And again, our market shares. So when we look at the future, when we look at our trainees, what are they saying? Obviously all of our robots have dual consoles because we are committed to teaching. And we do know that they are going to go out, and this is the MIS modality of their choice. So when we looked at resident applicants, 77%, this is again national data, they said they really want robotic assisted surgery. Now I'll tell you, we have a robotic surgery fellowship at NYU. It's a dedicated robotic surgery fellowship, and we have 2 MIS fellowship spots, which is a combination of laparoscopic and bariatric and some robotic, but ours is exclusively robotic. And there are people, and we match before the MIS match comes out because we want people who really want this niche fellowship. And our last 2 fellows both joined us after finishing an MIS fellowship elsewhere because they felt they were not proficient in robotics and they knew where the market was headed, where the world was headed. And they wanted, and actually they did so well, we recruited them to join our division. They're both actually within my division now, really helping us grow our robotic general surgery program. 47% growth of new surgeons, of course, that are coming out through residency or fellowship. And this is actually, I sit on our residency committees, obviously, for applications, and this is a question that they will always ask. I hear it over and over again. Well, what exposure to robotics are we going to get? How much time are we going to spend in robotics? Who are your surgeons? And again, surgeons who are just starting on, they are not the best trainers because they themselves are training, right? I think that comfort level of teaching comes from surgeons who are proficient, but there are certain advantages to the technology. When we are trying to teach lab, you're retracting, you have your 2 hands. Now, in order to give the control to the resident, You have to let go of the exposure, hand them the instruments, go to the other side of the table. Here with the swap, right, here on the console, we can switch hands, right? I can freeze them with the tap of a pedal, right? I can use telestration to tell them where to go, what to do. So training is so much more effective without compromising our operative times here. And this is actually, again, this is, my fellow shows this to me every time. He's like, look, I did 70% of the case. Because surgeons are constantly, we think that we let our trainees do a lot more of the case than they actually do. But now we have objective metrics, right? So it shows console 1 and console 2. Console 1 is actually me, and you can see I'm doing the majority of the case. Console 2 is my fellow who did, this is in November, a couple of months after he started his fellowship. Now, a month or so, a month and a half later, you can see console 1 is my fellow, Jordan, and he's doing the majority of the case, and I'm just taking control for a minute at a time just to show him a couple of things and giving the control right back. So I think it's just so important for us to be able to get some of these objective parameters as to how good a job we're doing with training our residents and fellows, and which is why we feel comfortable recruiting these people, because we know exactly how they're trained. And again, this is an intuitive hub for those of you who don't know or who don't have it. This is really, comes integrated with the DV5, but as a separate feature with the XIs. We have all the hubs where obviously it allows us to automatically, every case is recorded. It allows the media management. We can share, everything is stored on our protected iCloud. We can edit, share much more easily. And of course, we can go back and look at segmented case review. You just want to see one part of the case, you can click on that, right? And it also gives us now the opportunity of telepresence with our DV5, right? So tele-mentoring and tele-proctoring. Time is so precious for surgeons who travel everywhere to see each other. This makes the peer-to-peer learning much easier. I'll have people just look into my OR while I'm operating. They have the hubs, they're looking at it, or I can mentor or proctor them remotely. And I think it is really important for us to be able to look at this next generation technology. So DV5, as you know, FDA approved. Some systems already have it. We're getting ours actually in a week. And really, what is so unique about it compared to the XI? Obviously, lots more computing ability. 10 years went into developing this next system. I think, ergonomics. Surgeons love ergonomics. We thought we had great ergonomics on the console with the XI, but this really surpasses everything, where instead of us taking our body to the console comes to us. The surgeons are always asking, I need a chair, like my chair rolls around, and there are all kinds of things if you look on RSC that we talk about. So this really comes with the precise ergonomics of the chair for us, but more importantly, what does it mean from the efficiency standpoint? And this is where I think it promises gains in efficiency that are significant, because everything is really integrated and controlled heavily by the surgeon, right? With the head and console, we control our insufflation. Obviously, there's an integrated insufflator and smoke evac. You don't need a separate vendor or separate machine for insufflation or air seal or smoke evac. Again, like I said, the camera head, everything is integrated. You don't need a separate lap tower for it. From that, the surgeon controls all the energy settings from the head and console. And again, one of the big things is it is compatible with all our XI instruments. So we're not really reinvesting in a whole new set of instruments. But there are some special instruments like that give us force feedback. Because some of the resistance that we have seen, say, in our world with some of our HPB surgeons are saying, well, I don't get the feedback. It's so important. What if I rip that portal vein? I worry about that, And now we have something that allows us to really, objectively understand what that feedback is. A lot of us who've been doing this for, 15 years say we feel with our eyes. We don't even miss the haptic feedback because our brain is so wired to feel with our eyes. But a lot of the people who are starting out see that as a major limitation compared to laparoscopy. But now we have this where you are able to get that force feedback. You can sense when you're going to avult something, how much you're putting that traction or tension on that tissue. And I think that's a big part of training, not just the residents and fellows, but early adopters. Because again, come back to safety and quality first. We don't want outcomes that are adverse because someone is in their learning curve from this. So I think it's really important for us to understand. And of course, the case insights. And that's more for the surgeon. The case insights are not shared for the program to kind of chide your surgeons into, or hey, look, you're not doing as well. It's more for your own growth, where you look at it and you get some performance indicators, some kinematics that show you how many wasted motions you have, some targeted improvement exercises. So I think it's really very, very helpful. And the simulator comes built in with it. So again, not an additional thing, but you are able to get your surgeons proficient faster here and safely. So, you know, we always say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So it's just never too late to start looking at it. And actually, I was sitting in one of the sessions where the CEO session, they were talking about how having an open mind to innovation and understanding the temporal trends of where things are headed with what technology is going to be key for the institutions to be able to really, you know, sustain that growth and to be able to reinvest in their own future. So thank you for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions. Please.
My question is, how, from you starting to now, how did you get other surgeons to streamline? You discussed a little bit about streamlining their usage of instrumentation, stuff like that. How do you get them all on board? Like, you don't need multiple, you just need these.
Right.
Get everybody on board.
Yeah, you know, surgeons, as you know, are an interesting breed. They like to listen to other surgeons and not administrators. You know, so I think it's just so important to be able to do it in a way, you know, that there's power to data. You know, for them to be able to see, and it's actually, we would get these little graphs where the dots, where you are and where 7 other surgeons that are not named within the institution are when it comes to costs or operative times. Now that gets someone thinking, you know, well, I thought I was really good, but I mean, clearly the data says you know, my times are much longer and my costs are much higher. Well, what can I do better? And that's an opportunity for them to be able to, like, hey, you know, if you want, and it's a good idea because everybody understands we all want to go in that direction, let's have you go in and see your peer who's doing that. Let's see how they can do the same thing with one instrument that you are opening multiple instruments for. Yeah. Yes, please.
Thank you for your talk. I have a question. You showed a slide with 429 cases. Is that for what? How many robots is that? Is that per quarter?
Per system. Yeah, per year.
Per unit?
Per yep. Mm-hmm.
How do you decide if it's time for a second robot, a third robot?
Yeah, you know, I think once we start hitting that utilization on the robot of about 75%, we know it's time for another robot for us. It also obviously depends on what kind of program building investment we're making. If we're recruiting a couple of big HPB guys who are robotic or gals, we want to make sure that we are able to give them the access, and we are already pretty maxed out on our utilization. So we start thinking about, as you know, the flexible kind of acquisition models have really helped us. You know, most of our robots were all capital upfront investment, but now actually heavily, the last 11 robots, including the DV5, are flexible acquisitions. So it allowed us to not make that upfront investment, but to be able to get the access, because, you know, we don't have to wait for the return on investment to be able to buy another robot a few years down the road. So now, you know, of course, we have our concerns. You know, what if the technology becomes obsolete? What if the instruments are not compatible? Do we really want to go up front with that buy? But I think now with the AMP model and the flexible acquisition, we're able to really get that going and ramp up that utilization pretty quickly. Yes?
Looked into those numbers?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Actually, I'm thankful that we have such an amazing peri-op leadership team who watches this like a hawk. And you know, we used to have every 3-month utilization reports that came out. And if you had 2 quarters where you had less than 75% utilization, obviously your time was cut down. Now, in the spirit of pushing, you know, or raising the bar, we have monthly utilization meetings, and that block time utilization has been up to 80%. So if you have less than 80%, 2 quarters. So we also have really this whole command center, really, that's working behind the scenes to figure out and juggle. We never want a robot to sit idle for us. And I think, like you said, it's a real thing, but you need people who are invested in that. It's just sometimes, it used to be that there was a robot there and someone was doing a lab case in there, or an open case. Made no sense to do that. So now actually we're very mindful behind the scenes. We check our bookings, our times, and like you said, surgeons who are not utilizing that, we will take that away. Yes?
You obviously had a lot of foresight, training and developing this program. Where do you think this is going to go in the next 15 to 20 years? What is robotic surgery going to look like in the next?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think laparoscopy is going to be antiquated, right? We're already seeing those trends, and I was an advanced lap surgeon for years. I thought I could do everything minimally invasively. But this is a completely different world that we're in. And I think, there will be really, if you think about it, this is what happens when there's stagnation in innovation, right? Things die. Laparoscopy has had no innovation in the last couple of decades, right, since it was introduced. And here we are on the 5th generation Da Vinci, right? So this kind of innovation will really keep us just going 100% robotic. It's going to be some cases that are going to be open, which are going to be something that is going to be, there is no MIS approach for that, but everything else is going to be just robotic from that standpoint. So where are we going to go? I think we have to start looking at how already we will see with DV5 some of the AI insights that we're going to start getting that's going to help us make some decisions around. Where we go, in some ways, as you guys know, we say robot is a misnomer. It's not an autonomous thing. It's controlled by the surgeon. But do we go there? I don't know. We'll see. But I see every one of our ORs really that does abdominal, thoracic, surgery to have a robot in there. That's going to be a standard part of our armamentarium, and everything is going to be integrated in our rooms. Yeah.
Do you think this also leads to surgeons working remotely? Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, we are unfortunately with our legal system liability aspects toward, as much as you can see that in the Army and, the combat zones or whatever, this is something that I think, we talked about the liability aspects of even tele-proctoring and tele-mentoring, but I think tele-surgery, where the surgeon is completely removed from that location, I think, I know some people have started publishing, but you still need a qualified person, a surgeon really, at bedside. The primary operating surgeon may not be at bedside, but you do need someone who can be at bedside in those situations. So, I've been in situations where if I had to troubleshoot, an instrument got stuck and nobody else knew what to do, and we pull out the wrench and take that. So I think there's always potential. Surgery can be very unpredictable. As much as we try to make it predictable, there is no textbook. So I just don't know if within elective world or where we are in the civilian world, if we will have telesurgery in the next 10 years. Any other questions? Great, thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.